Today's guest is Jennifer Mabus. She's a choreographer, performer, educator, and founder of Grackle Dance Collective. Jennifer's work centers community, empathy, and immersive audience experiences while creating meaningful opportunities for artists across North Texas. Today, we'll explore what it takes to build artistic communities that truly support creative growth. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here.
We're so excited. So we're doing things a little bit different. For season 8, we're going to start with our Flash 4 segment. This is our quickfire round where we ask all guests to answer 4 questions in a flash. Are you ready?
Try to be.
Okay, here we go. What's one resource every arts leader should know about? Could be a book, a podcast, a blog.
In this area, I would say Agora Artists. They're really working to create community here in Dallas and connect all of these wonderful dance orgs we have here. And in the greater community, I would say find your local community like Dance Source Houston or wherever that is, Dance USA, Dance NYC, but find that organization and connect in so that we can build more community.
What's a public space in Dallas that inspires your creativity?
Honestly, Arts Mission Oak Cliff. That was kind of when I first moved back to Dallas. That was my artistic home and still is. So I love the fact that it appreciates kind of the sacredness of the artistic process, but also community. They're working for advocacy. They hold space. That space is magic. Some of my favorite choreography has come from there, and the people there are just amazing.
And for those who maybe aren't familiar with Arts Mission Oak Cliff, could you just give like a brief plug?
Arts Mission Oak Cliff is a art space, not dance space. In Oak Cliff, it was built in an old church. Some amazing people took this church over, remodeled it, built it into an artist space. There's a recording studio. There's a sanctuary for performance space and rehearsal space. There's a movement room. There's a lot of opportunities for community there. They do an artist in residence, which is a really amazing experience. That was my first thing I did when I moved home. And it really gave me room to play and create and find my voice here.
And I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that as the episode continues. And for those of you who have been following No Box for a while, we actually had our very first film festival at Arts Mission Oak Cliff back in 2019. So we felt like it was definitely like a launching pad space where we met a lot of the creatives that we're still working with to this day. So we're grateful.
I love that.
Our last in our quickfire round is, what's one word you hope describes the future of dance in North Texas?
Give me a second on that. Human.
I know it's quickfire, but do you care to expound on that?
I would love to see, I think dance in general promotes not human evolution, but compassion, empathy, connection, community. And when we lose sight of that, we lose sight of what we're doing. And so I hope that we stay connected to each other as fellow travelers and fellow artists on this path, and create space for each other while sharing our voices as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jennifer, when I first met you, I will never forget, I was at Sam Houston State University. I was an undergrad and you were a graduate student. Mm-hmm. And your first work that I really remember seeing was you took over this old historic home in Huntsville, and you created such like a truly immersive experience. And I feel like as an undergrad student who, my perception, I think, of the dance world was just like, studio training, and then basically what I learned in my classes as an undergrad, seeing ballets and things like that growing up. But I feel like just like my perception of what dance could be was pretty like narrow. I have like horse sliders on, and then seeing you take over this historic house where the performers were like interacting with us as the audience and guiding us through the performance, like truly changed my life as an artist, and really impacted like, how can I make work like that? That really like,
gosh, and you're impacting so many people now with your work. I love that.
That's very sweet. But it really resonated with me and with so many people, I think, just to see like, this is possible, like to actually connect people. I think a lot of times in dance, we think of like a traditional dance show where you're seeing dance on a proscenium stage and the audiences are in their seats. And there's so much value in that.
Yes.
But I also think to have that like interaction with performers really like enhances your appreciation for the art form and what it can look like. And so I'd love to kind of hear about your journey. I know you started dancing professionally and you've had such an amazing career, truly inspiring, but kind of how did you land into creating work like that?
I was fortunate to dance for a lot of wonderful choreographers in New York, Robert Battle. And even though that was stage work and crafted and concert work, I really, I felt like for some reason we touched on something that impacted people a lot. And audiences really responded to what we did. It was very visceral, very powerful, passionate work. And that I kind of was like, something's happening here that I feel like people are connecting with this work. And then when I was living up in New York, my brother came to visit me, and he has, and he would be fine if I share this, ADHD. And so I took him to see De La Guardia. That was, they had, I can't remember the name of the building right now, that they had, it's an old bank around Union Square where they were doing their performance there. And it was an immersive experience, interactive experience. You walk into this room and they're like breaking through a paper ceiling, staring at you, and then they're dancing with you and pulling you in. They took some people up in the air. That was all aerial work, and they created a big dance party by the end. And I was enthralled. I was like, this is amazing. I get to dance with people. But it was also, seeing my brother. He's seen my dance concerts all my life, and had to sit through a lot of dance. But to see him engaged and interested the whole time. And he kind of said, that's the first, performance I've really just been like so active and engaged the entire time. And I was like, there's something here and it excites me. And then I guess when I moved home, I love the art form of dance. And there is dance, that has really impacted me, made me feel less alone, made me feel understood on stage. But the people that really started to hit me doing that were people that somehow broke that barrier a little bit, found a way, even, like Batsheva having a stand up in the audience, or just even Pina Bausch's work that just seemed to jump off the stage, that, a lot of that kind of work just started to really speak to me. And then I got interested just through kind of researching some site-specific stuff. I got interested in what Third Rail is doing and their work in New York with like Vince Schieffel, and they just did these beautiful works that were like so powerful and really imagistic, but also like so personal. And they, I was fortunate, the chair of our dance department, Jennifer Pontius at Sam Houston, knew Janine Lutt, one of the founders and developers of that work. So she got me a ticket into one of their showings in New York, and I went up just on a whim, went for 2 days to see this. And they were doing a work in process out on Roosevelt Island. And the funny thing of this is I got the wrong day and showed up at the wrong time. And they had just finished their last show, but they weren't striking yet. And she's like, oh, you're Jennifer's friend. I was like, yes. And she's like, okay, well, let's walk you through. And so I got a private showing of this, which was like even better because I was getting to talk to her about like what was happening there and what they were thinking and what the process was. She walked me through this maze, and it was all about life and death. And I got like private performances of a couple. She's like, you came all the way. We'll then give you private performances, because they still had some friends coming through the house.
That's incredible.
So like this one performer took me into this room, sat me on this bench, and we did this whole thing, with the oil, and like laid me down on the bench and raised up the side. And then I was like in an open topped casket, and he laid some fabric over it. Then some other people came in and viewed me. It was just like, what? Wow. I went into another room where they were like saying, will it be warm or cold? Will you have your family around? What season will it be? Kind of thinking about how we would die. And it was like this, like, so powerful. And I was like, wow, that dance and arts can do this for people. I was just like, can I please just like hang out with you all? So, and then I saw Vince Schieffel that same weekend. their Alice in Wonderland show. And, you know, they have it so organized beautifully where they take you into rooms and you get solo dances or group things and you're learning choreography with teacups. And it just was, you know, just what I thought it should be. I was like, wow. And like you get a poem at the end with a cup of tea, you know, like it's just this like incredible. Their work is just incredible. And I believe it really gets to the heart of things. You know, people are looking you in the eyes. People are, it just kind of shook me, you know, and I love other work, you know, like some of the, you know, Sleep No More and things like that. But that you kind of have to chase the show around unless you get one of the lucky people that gets pulled into a room. And I really loved and their work is so powerful and beautiful and their performers are amazing. But I really loved this really guided experience that everyone had and this really thoughtful experience of that. And so that kind of got me engaged into this work. So I was lucky at SAM that they gave me kind of free reign. I had 25 students that would be willing to do this. And we just took over this house and like even took over the Wynn home and just kind of was able to create this and experiment. And it was a nice safe space to kind of do that because it's like, if this fails, it fails. It's no big deal, you know, like if it's like people are like, oh, this is weird, you know, but it really like I had never felt my work have such impact as that. It was like I was telling really personal stories about my own life and my parents, and the house was an engagement gift in its history to a new couple. So I kind of told the love stories in my family, and it was, and you know, some of them not happy love stories, but all the you know, those kinds of things, and people were just really impacted by it, or they told me they were, and it just kind of, and the performers were really impacted by it. They took ownership. You know, students who were fabulous dancers, but, you know, still kind of learning that performing thing, they just jumped in and like started creating their characters and adding to on their own. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. You know, like put one dancer on the staircase and she went to town and created this whole character of allowing people up and not allowing people up the stairs. And, you know, it was such a wonderful experience that I kind of got obsessed. And I was fortunate in Houston. Pilot Dance Project let me take over a funeral home and do a work. I called it Requiem and used all my favorite pieces of Requiem music and do a work about the grief process. And, you know, each time I do these works, it's so rewarding because it's a very collaborative experience because the performers have to really take ownership and have to not be afraid to connect with people and allow that kind of magic of if people don't respond the way you expect them, what do you do? And you're collaborating with the audience because they have to come in kind of willing to interact and to be human and be vulnerable, which is also a huge honor. I did a show recently where it's called Gardens and Graveyards about gardening, but also like what do we want to grow in our lives? What do we want to bury? What are our choices in that? Can things bury us or can they help us grow? And we asked the audience questions like, you know, what do you have to let go of to grow? And like that responses people gave us, and we danced those back to them, just gave them a little dance for whatever they gave us. But like they were so honest and vulnerable. And I was like, you know, I just was so touched that someone would share that with me. You know, so that was really, really an impactful thing for me. And I kind of am obsessed with that.
Yeah, and I want to dig into kind of two different paths with some of the things that you mentioned. So many of our listeners are either dance performers, dancers themselves, or choreographers, or maybe they're audiences of dance experiences. And so first I want to like dive into like advice for performers. You mentioned kind of how meaningful it was that the performers took ownership of their characters and their roles when creating these immersive experiences. And I'm wondering, like, in the creative process, how are you kind of cultivating that confidence with performers? And you know, we haven't talked about it much here, but you're also such a powerful dance educator. So in those creative experiences, like how are you teaching them and framing these parameters to give them that ownership. And could you give us kind of like a mini lesson right now if there's performers, listening?
Yeah. Sometimes I think I'm just kind of learning as I do.
Oh my God.
So I think it's a lot of it is trust. Performers and students know when you trust them.
And what does that look like?
Just coming in together in this, engaging them in the problem solving, and engaging them in the creative process, and with consent. Consent is always such a huge thing, but I have had a lot of dancers, like we've incorporated their stories into either the soundscapes or into the movement or into the characters they're building. I did one piece where each room was I just met with each dancer individually and was like, okay, I think of this when I think of you. How does that feel? And let's create around that. And some really beautiful things came out that I did not expect, that the dancers really became themselves as artists. And I think that's the main thing, is knowing that you're working with artists that are creative and that they can engage in the process.
Do you have concrete advice, maybe like 3 tips for performers when they're entering into an experience like that, like how to show up as their best self and to truly collaborate and be open, but also, receive direction?
Yeah, I would say ground in yourself. Find some grounding practice, breath work, whatever. But that kind of grounding, I think, allows you to be present with other people. Know where your boundaries are, and be willing to speak up about that, and think on that, and know that can change, and you can choose where and how you want to share. And if a director is asking you to move past those, don't do it. And engage yourself as a creative, or trust yourself as a creative. There's no right or wrong answer. I mean, I think we all know this as creatives, and those of us that teach choreography and things like that, I think we have to get rid of the idea that there's a wrong answer, and to allow, what your instinct is usually right. And something else we did, when I did the funeral home, we knew that could have some kind of grief responses for people. And one of the dancers had a friend who was a counselor, and we brought him into rehearsal to give us advice on what to do and how to be safe with that and not, re-traumatize people or harm people. And, just even about how to ground people, help them leave the space if they need to, and just be there with them, direct them to people that can help them, and, some of that kind of stuff. I think, when we're wandering into connecting with people, we want to make sure to be cognizant of where they are as well, and in their safety.
And that's definitely like where I want to go next, is talking about the audience and kind of how you're thinking about that. You, as I mentioned in the introduction, you've recently founded Grackle Dance Collective, which is a collaborative platform for local North Texas artists. So I want to hear more about, first off, why you founded this collective, and then second, how are you thinking about the audience when you're creating works with your collective now?
Yeah.
Because you have a work coming up at a skate park, which is so cool. The images for this show look fantastic. They're so captivating. But I remember seeing them and I'm like, skate park? Like,
I know.
That's so cool. That's so like out of the box thinking. So yeah, can you talk to us about
what was the questions?
So talk to me about founding the collective, and then I'd love to dive deeper into talking about how you're engaging the audience.
Yeah, I think I've been very fortunate so far. My artist in residence at Arts Mission Oak Cliff, and then my last production I did there as well. They helped me present work there. Were well attended and well received, and it made me think, well, maybe I have kind of something to say and add to here. And also, the wonderful independent artists that are collected around that community were engaged in the work and wanting to engage in the work. And so I started thinking maybe it's time. I was like, is this name Grackle weird to anybody? I started asking friends. I sent a text to Avery J, Timothy Amaral, and some people like that I was like, what do you think? And they're like, do you, But, and I just started seeing, for one, there's so many creative artists here. Agora Artists is doing an amazing job of really supporting independent artists and the companies here. And I just thought could there be more space for more people to tell these stories and to create work that is getting into the communities? And, so that was sort of the impetus behind it. I also want to shout out Ray Barnard. They are amazing. And they kind of came along beside, approached me and was like, I'd love to help you build this. So they're really instrumental in helping me in the areas especially that I am so weak at as far as some of the organization and development and management. And they're just a very vital part of this work. So
we actually had Ray on our last season of the podcast.
I love their work too. And they're also an amazing creative artist in their own right. So I'm very, very fortunate to have that. And I have some other artists like Carson Milligan, Lauren Kravitz that are kind of repeat performers with me, Willow DeBose and people like that are really coming in, Imani Butler, that are coming in with, we have a shared language already and with their own strong creative impetuses. So I kind of was like, what happens if we create together and, and bring more people in as we develop fundraising and stuff like that. But so that was kind of my thought, was like, okay, create a space for Texas artists that can be my own vehicle for my own creative work, but also a vehicle for other creative work. And, and to highlight Texas voices, but also I'm just this whole thing of like getting into the community is really important to me. And, our first debut was a stage work, but even then, we talked about, played with, we engaged community stories. We had people fill out a Google form of times where they felt community care or where they felt struggle. One of the things we inspired by the Grackle bird, which is a native Texas bird. And they're the ones that you see in parking lots. People are like, oh, I hate them. I love them. They're so cool. They're always eating French fries.
Yeah.
And they're hanging out over, they hang out on the wires because the cars come underneath the parking lights and when they stop at the stoplights, and that warms them up. So they're just so resourceful.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
I found that out. And their eyes move independently of each other, which is so cool. And they recognize humans. They remember you. And so, like, if you're a nice human or if you've given them food, I know, they remember that. And if you haven't, or if you're mean to them, they remember that as well. And they tell each other. So they're amazing. So they raise their young in community, and then they separate out and stuff like that. But they're just fascinating birds, and everybody hates them, and I love that. I love that they're kind of mean and kind of badass and they're gritty
subculture.
So we were like inspired by the idea of grit and community care. So audience members told us or not audience members, community members told us their stories and gave consent, and we added those into the score. And collaboration is a big thing for me. So I work with musicians, especially a lot, and a production designer. So we incorporated, the singer wrote these beautiful songs from Brittany Beitman-Nearing wrote these beautiful songs from these stories, and I had Willa Bossier creating all this cool percussion. And so, like, even with stage, I'm still trying to kind of reach out to the audience. But the skate park came from my husband. Was a skateboarder as a kid. He was kind of sponsored. He's one of those like good skateboarders that people, they wanted him to skate on their boards and all the things. Like I don't even really understand that. I'm learning. But and I also went to high school with Mike Crum and his brother, who was a pro skater. He actually started homeschooling, and so he could go pro and like toured the world skateboarding, is still a pro skateboarder. And he had started this 4 Down Skate Park, which is a nonprofit skate park that they started right before the pandemic. And they, during the pandemic, kind of realized some of the kids there were hungry and families were suffering. And so they started getting donations from Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. And now they do a biweekly handout of groceries and food. And they do like a weekly grill and chill, which is like a community meal that they just cook and everybody comes and skateboards and whatever and eats it. And they've started adding a creative coalition, which they've had a sculptor come and work with. You can make little bowls. They've had a cardboard artist create, trying to create accessible art. So we all like made art on cardboard. And then I've been teaching some dance classes as part of that, which has been really just so cool and so fun. And it's been like a mix of some of the dancers in the community and the people there. And we're like, okay, what's a skateboarding move? And how do we make that look like a dance move? And so it's been a really fun creative process. But one of the things I'm seeing in that community is they are the kids that walk in there, when they put on their knee pads and their helmets and they carry their board, you can tell they're proud. Like there's this sort of like, this is I'm cool, And I feel that way when I walk in a dance studio. Like these are my people. It's
my space.
This is what I love to do, and this is, it's a bit of my identity in a way. And, like it's, especially as a young person, when life can be a little chaotic, it's something that builds confidence, the physical struggle to overcome these things, all of that so connects with what we do. And so they agreed to let me do a show there. And they, the first day we were rehearsing in there, the skateboarders were walking over and were like, what are y'all doing? And we're like, we're making a dance show. So it's been super fun. The dancers are amazing. We walked onto the half pipe, which is this huge ramp. Yeah. And first thing Carson and Lauren did was like run up and grab onto the thing and slide down. And I was like, what? So it's been really fun to create in that environment. They have an indoor area, which has ramps and things like that. So most of the show will be in there because it'll be air conditioned and it's summer, but then we'll move outdoors for the half pipe for the finale and that kind of stuff. So we have two skateboarders in the show. And so that's been really fun. One is my husband, but he got yanked in. But another one is this great young kid that just graduated from Booker T that is like doing flips up on the ramp. And we're like,
Are the dancers going to be on skateboards?
No.
Okay. I'm just wondering. I'm like, do they have like a hidden talent?
I was like, we're gonna do what we do well. I do put a foot on it once during a duet that I do, but someone's sliding this.
Like, I don't think I could.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
so that makes me feel better.
Yeah, no, they're running up and down on ramps. They're doing what they do well, and we've got some really fabulous dancers. A new dancer, Luis Gomez, who's just doing a great job. So I'm really excited about it. But and a lot of it is we've got again recordings from skateboarders, recordings from the dancers, and the music score by Willa Bossier, and we've got a projection design by Chris Ham, who's the designer from SMU, lighting person. So he's been filming up at the skate park and is going to create projection design in the space. And
Sounds
so
incredible.
It's been really so fun to create. Really, it's been the sweaty process too, but it's been, the dancers have been amazing. And it's been really fun. I mean, I feel like there's this kind of community growing of us that's kind of interested in what are the different ways we look at dance. And so it's been really fun to engage some of those artists that are also asking that question in this process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk more about like community. I feel like it's such a big word, especially like in arts and nonprofits. I think there's definitely like a shift in how people are using the word. I've started to notice, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. I feel like it used to be about like cultivating your audience, and that was kind of the language. And now it seems like everyone's talking about like building your community. But I feel like how I think about community is it's kind of like what already exists kind of in the work that you're doing. And then of course there's that intentionality behind it, and how are you actually serving the people in the spaces where the work is already happening. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like how are you approaching community with Grackle Dance Collective or in the classroom when you're teaching, at different spaces. Like, what are you thinking about when it comes to community, and what should we be thinking about?
I don't know if I can say what we should be thinking about, but for me, I think I'm seeing this across the board. I think our response to the current climate and politically and otherwise is encouraging, the division we're feeling, the anger we're feeling. I think it's encouraging a lot of us to look at our responsibility as artists. Art is valuable. Like, we don't need to put on artists a role that's not our role. But I think a lot of us, art has transformed our lives, and we're trying to figure out how do we help other people with that, and how do we, I even see even Bruce Wood, who's kind of one of our, established companies here, they've been talking about that. Bruce always talked about, how art should make you feel when you leave the theater. It should make you feel something. And so I think there's a lot of us that have always kind of been like, how is it impact? Is it, we want people to feel something when they see, like, we feel something.
And it's hard because it's like, you can't really measure that. Like, nope. You can try, right? With
then work on a grant report.
But it's like, you have to, create some type of incentive to fill out this survey to prove a value. But like, art is such, like, you can't put it into words.
No.
So it's like, how do we communicate that value of the impact we are having on our community?
Yeah. And I have no idea, except for to try to do it. It's, during the pandemic and afterwards, during a lot of loss in my own life, I've been kind of halfway on and off again studying dance movement therapy. I'm intrigued about, the therapeutic benefits of dance for everybody, but, and I'm not trying to be a therapist. I'm, a choreographer, but there's something in that, and I don't want people to have to bare all their souls to me, that's a therapeutic space that's very valuable. But as artists, there is something I think that we bring into, and in the creative process, I think the creative process is healing. I think performance is healing. I think viewing performance is healing, and it hasn't been in my life. Every time I've created through a lot of really hard things, it's helped me, but also somehow impacted other people. And, and as we're doing that too, I think this is kind of a wandering answer, but a lot of people in our community are in danger right now in the dance community, and being who they are is being challenged. And so how do we create safe space? And I think community care looks very real in that way of like, I'm not a social worker, but there are needs in front of me. How do I help? And how do I help in a way that's not about me? How do I think so many times we try to help, but it's from what we think people need. So it's a lot of listening, I think, and just holding space is something I'm trying to do. And I fail at it miserably most of the time, but I'm trying to hold space and give ownership to dancers in my space of their bodies, of their learning, of what they want to say. And that is at least something that is a goal. And I'm learning from the dancers in my space how to do that better.
Is there someone that you are inspired by, or that, you look up to, who you think does that really well? And it doesn't have to necessarily be an artist, but maybe somebody.
Gosh, so many people
in this world.
I think there are people that I think of Jerry Houlihan, dance educator. I watched her teach a class at American Dance Festival, and afterwards, it was packed. It was 50 dancers in there. She said something to everyone about what she saw in them in that class. And I was like, how do you do that? That was early on in my career, and I was like, I want to be that kind of a teacher. Yeah. My mom was a teacher, and one of those impactful ones. I still have people coming up to me going, "You're Phyllis Mabus's daughter." And I'm like, yes, I am. And they're like, she taught my child and she changed their life. And my mom was a learning difference specialist, and she really helped kids learn how to read and was just amazing. And as always, the work of a teacher life stuff is going on and you're there in your classroom and you have to do this work of teaching someone how to read, but also you have to care for the whole person.
Right.
And so I think I've had a lot of dance educators in my life that have done that well. There's a lot of people here doing that well. You know, I can think of the professors at all the universities here at TCU.
Yeah.
I see that happening. TWU, I see that happening. You know, like I see that happening at SMU. I see that happening everywhere where people are starting at Booker T, where people are like, you know, we know that we're not just teaching dancers. We're not just making dancers. We are teaching people. And, you know, I'm very fortunate that I've had a lot of examples. Even my very first ballet teacher, Denise Brown. I don't know if any dancers know Denise Brown, but she was a Holocaust survivor and fought in the French Resistance as, you know, as a young woman, you know, how that they would be delivering things and that kind of stuff. And never told us about it, but it taught me to love dance and created art around that. And her daughter created art around the idea of war and the violence of war and never being literal. I think at the time her family was still being very protective. But it impacted me as a young person of like, dance is about something more. And so that's kind of like from, you know, when at 4 years old, you have teachers like that, it definitely teaches you a lot of that. But there's also like Jason Biondo and Kalila Holman. These are dance movement therapists that really know how to hold space for people. And, you know, I got to study with them a little bit and see how they impact people and the courage they have to walk into a room of maybe people that are so frustrated and hurt that they're almost violent and walk up and say, you need to come to dance class. You know, like it's just, they have the courage to be with people. And so, you know, I'm still learning a lot of that. So that's a long answer for that.
No, I think that's really helpful. And I think it really adds to the conversation on how we can think about community and who to look to as we build our own frameworks and intentionality behind it.
Yeah. I think that's happening all around, even with the shift of Agora artists to being a service organization. And, you know, Avery J is creating an advisory board to create that. I think with the work you're doing with the podcast and stuff like that, I think all of us are like, how do we talk about this and how do we impact the people around us? You know?
And one thing you touched on a little bit is kind of the many, I guess, pipelines, if you will, for, you know, people in the dance world, whether it's teaching, performing, choreographing, maybe, you know, other roles that don't even exist yet. I'm kind of wondering, like, what are your thoughts on, like, what are the skills necessary to be a future dance artist? And and I guess, like, do you have any advice on kind of how to prioritize being a dance artist? And I ask this kind of from a place of like frustration, because I feel like, you know, we take on all these roles kind of as a means to an end, right? To make that artistic life possible. And, you know, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to work for such big companies, you know, and so you kind of create your own opportunities. But especially I don't think that's always the answer either, because then you take on so much responsibility and you're learning all these things that sometimes, you know, the art takes a back seat. So I'm wondering, what's your thinking on that, especially as somebody who has excelled, I feel like, in every part of the dance field from my perspective. Like as an educator, performer, choreographer, I feel like you kind of reached the pinnacle for each of those.
Oh gosh, thank you.
It's true, you know? So from your perspective now, I'm curious, like, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and also, I think dance is changing and shifting a lot. And I guess if students, I would say, there's not one way of success in this. And I think so many times those of us that are teaching have had one way of doing it, and we want to be like, this is what worked for me, but it keeps changing and evolving. So I think it's a little bit like success can be it can be, you know, being a lawyer, being a parent, being that kind of thing, and dancing when you have free time. It can look like going and dancing for a major company and then figuring out your voice. It can look like, you know, I really love teaching and just focusing on teaching. And, you know, it can look like a lot of ways. The advice I would give is dance is wonderful because we have a legacy. We all have our family trees of our teachers, you know, that go back to the beginnings. And so look to those people, ask questions, honor that, learn from that. You can decide to go way against it, rebel against it, but know what was behind you, know what was happening, because then you can figure out, use the tools or throw away the tools where you want to go. Don't repeat. You don't have to repeat, you know. I would say that. I would say one of the biggest skills for dancers, I call it with itness, but it's just because I didn't have a lot of, like, I, you know, was doing dance team in high school and then went to SMU, and I went to New York without a resume. I had no idea what I was doing. But what served me the best was kind of just looking around and like, okay, this is what's working. Okay, where did you go get your headshot? Okay, where did you go do your resume? What does your resume look like? Or looking in class, okay, this dancer seems to be figuring it out. What are they doing? Or at auditions, you know, who's doing what? Or going and seeing work. What do you like? What do you not like? Talking to the choreographers you meet, talking to the people in the community. I see the young dancers right now, I see in this area, there's some that are really, they're going to everything and they're really connecting and engaging. And I love that because then you're developing your own voice. Yeah. And it's okay also just to dance for people for a while and, you know, like do pickup work and, you know, figure out what works for you the best. And, you know, this is from Jessica Lang, but she gave the advice to my students and I was sitting there and I was like stealing. But it's people, work, or money. And as you're deciding what you want to do as a dancer, whether to take an opportunity or not, you know, you kind of want two of those met. You want to love the people you work with and love the work. And then I'm willing to wait tables if that's there. If the money's really good and like, okay, the people are okay. Maybe the work's not what I dream of doing. But, you know, it's kind of finding those things. And I just thought that was incredible advice that Jessica gave those students at TCU. And so I kind of think of that a lot when I'm, you know, it's like, what's important to you? I was willing to teach yoga, wait tables, and all of that because I was so in love with Robert's work. And even now I'm willing to figure out how to support building a company because I'm really in love with the artists I'm working with, and I love seeing this work develop in everybody. So it's really, you know, I think it's that figuring out what you need and what you want.
I think that's such great advice because, you know, sometimes people say, like, you can have it all and there's balance. And I don't really think that exists, honestly. I feel like
you have to figure out what your balance is.
Yeah, you just pick what's your priority for this season of life,
and
or this chapter.
I mean, I see when people become parents, there is that moment in time where it's like, okay, maybe this is taking a back seat, but it can come back.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's not a timeline, too. That's what I would say to anybody. You know, I'm fortunate that I'm still dancing in my 50s, and I would encourage dancers to not think, oh, if I haven't figured it out by 30, I am a failure. And, you know, like you can take a break, do what you need to do, and come back, you know?
I love that because it just takes the pressure off, too.
Yeah.
I think there's just like some of these old systems, especially in the dance community,
yeah.
put so much pressure on you to like have achieved all of it by like when you're 25.
I know.
And then
you're
it's like,
just getting started.
I don't even know who I was. Like,
I mean, I think you really become the dancer you are in your 30s, you know, and then the 40s were really fun. I was like, oh, this is fun. And then, you know, like, hopefully the 50s will be fun too. But
I love that.
Yeah, but I think that I think we think there's a timeline and there's not. And it looks different for everybody.
And I just appreciate that, like, optimistic viewpoint, you know, because there's just like, there's so much life to be had.
Yeah.
And there's so much we can offer the world.
And if you decide to like leave dance and because you want to do something else, this will serve you no matter what. You know, like dancers make amazing nurses because they understand the body. like they understand how to calm people because we understand presence and breathing and or whatever, whatever it is that you love to do, like besides this. But yeah, I just think that it's valuable no matter what you decide to do.
I love that. Jennifer, what excites you most about the future of dance in Dallas and North Texas?
The people around me. But I'm seeing a lot of really exciting work happening from the foundational companies here. They're really questioning and pushing the boundaries of performance, creating collaborations. The work that's happening with those companies here is just so exciting. And then from the new voices, the independent artists that are starting to do work, I'm seeing all these kind of works in process and things like that. People are really stepping in and doing things, and then dancers are engaging as performers, and that just is so exciting to see. And I just hope we can keep building on it. And I see us connecting and collaborating. I'm seeing more and more the less of the siloing, and we're starting to talk to each other, which is really exciting.
And for those that are listening that may not be from North Texas or aren't even familiar with this area, what do you want them to know about the dance and art scene here?
Check us out. I think it's really people-based. I think we're really, it's very, we have some really beautiful classical or classically based work. We have some really beautiful crafted work. We've got people trying new things that are taking it out of the boundaries. We've got young, exciting voices. We've got more mature folks that are like still saying stuff. I just think it's really exciting that the broad variations in our company, right, in our community right now. It's just wonderful. So
yeah, I feel like the range and the access we have here is
really
amazing, and I feel very privileged to be kind of emerging in this period where we have access to people like you and like you said, and some of the companies who've been here for a long time, and see how they are growing with the times and making changes and having those hard conversations. I think that may not be the case, everywhere else.
Yeah. I'm proud of us. We're doing good.
Yay. Pat on the back. Well, before we have our final question, Jennifer, is there anything that you want to make sure you share with our listeners that we haven't talked about today?
I can't think of it. I'm just grateful to be a part of this community. I moved here back home. I've spent I moved home about 3 years ago. And before that, I was in Houston, creating a dance program and working with artists there and building work. And, I was really loving my work there. And I was a little nervous about moving back home. And I was doing some caregiving for my family. But I have been so grateful the welcome I've had back into this community. And I'm grateful for the artists that I've met and been able to collaborate with. So I think gratitude is the one thing.
We're happy you're here. How do you personally say no to the box and yes to the future of dance?
I think I just keep in mind that I love this and I'm incredibly gifted to do it. And so I just keep doing it and keep trying. So I think that's not really a very good answer, but it's more of a yes.
I love that. Well, Jennifer, thank you for coming on our show today. I have been dying to have you on our podcast. I just feel like you have so much wisdom to share with our listeners. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, I've been such a huge fan of the work that you create and how you really are challenging what's possible and what dance can be, and just kind of opening that viewpoint for not just dance and the arts, but just what it's like to connect with people and what that can feel like and how long that impact can really last. I can really remember your work in the house and feel it. It's so crazy, how it can change.
Thank you.
Change your experience. Thank you for coming on our show, Jennifer.
It's an honor because I respect your work as well and I admire your work, so it's an honor. I'm honored.
And for our listeners, how can everyone stay connected with you and the Grackle Dance Collective and what you have going on?
come see us next week. But Grackle.dance on Instagram, Jen Mabus on Instagram, JenniferMabus.com. We don't have a website for Grackle Dance yet, but that's to be coming, so I'll leave links to that from those places. But yeah, you can sign up for our newsletter, and we'd love to have you join us.
And we'll link everything for you all in the show notes. Well, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is fun. Thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you for joining us as we explore what it means to build the future of dance. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe on our YouTube, follow the podcast, and leave a rating or review. Every share, review, and recommendation helps us reach more artists, leaders, and change makers. At Dance Behind the Screen, every guest receives an artist stipend because we believe artists should be valued for their time, knowledge, and creative labor. If you'd like to support future episodes and help us continue investing directly in artists, please visit noboxdance.com/support. I'm Martheya, and this is Dance Behind the Screen. Until next time, keep saying no to the box and yes to the future of dance.